All right, welcome everybody. Make yourselves at home. Grab a coffee if you haven't gotten one. Grab a Magic Mind. They pair well together. And we will get started as people funnel in with the LA approach to to timing and events and logistics. We'll just funnel them to the seats next to you. But we will get started. So to begin, pretty much once a month, we started doing this a little over 2 years ago. And every month we do a large gathering like this. And one of the members of the group started calling it the Venice Vedanta Club. So, which we'll talk about here today in a bit, the philosophy of Vedanta. But within the Venice Vedanta Club, we started to begin each of these philosophy club hangs. It still is so informal, and it's space for any philosophical discourse, conversation, question. Questions are sacred. And Daniel, good to see you. And this space is room for really, like I said, any question, any topic. And we'll kick it off with a few questions between Geoff and myself, who's been coming to VVC for a little over a year, maybe a year and a half. And then we'll open it up for questions from the group and really discussion, not even just Q&A to us, but discussion with the group, which is just behind questioning. Discussion is so profoundly valuable for our reflection on these topics. Anyone can think that they have the answers, but then when you have to verbalize, you have to articulate it. And I highly encourage discussion amongst friends after this. When you have to articulate it, you realize, holy shit, I really don't know what I'm talking about. In Vedanta, in the tradition of Vedanta, discussion is actually the highest form of reflection, higher than sitting quietly writing, higher than solitude in an isolated space, which is what we conventionally think of as reflection in the West. But in the East, and in terms of continuous study, the oldest philosophical tradition in the world, within this tradition of Vedanta, reflection is actually best done in groups, in discussion. But before we begin our own conversation and then the Q&A with you all, we're going to start in the exact same way that we start our VVC meetings, which is just arriving where we are and taking a few deep breaths on your own, perhaps even closing your eyes just to arrive. Yeah, come on in. There's seats right over here. To arrive where we are, because we all know how busy the mind gets. Start to the day, you got to go from here to there, to there, to there, thinking about the next thing and never truly arriving where we are. So let's take a few moments to just arrive where we are before we begin. All right. Yeah, come on in. There's a handful of seats over here. And that stillness is so sweet, especially in the morning. Stillness is an indulgence of infinite value, and it's so easy to tap into anywhere we go. And yet every meeting, and we talk about this so often, every meeting, it is almost like a reintroduction of how amazing just arriving where we are can be. And that stillness is so nice.
Yeah, it felt like a luxury at one point, just thinking of it. And I was like, wait, I can get this anytime. At any moment, I can provide that for myself. But in that moment, it just feels so good to arrive and be here.
We'll start with, since there are a handful of new faces, a handful of familiar ones as well, but with a bit of an introduction for ourselves, and then we'll jump into our conversation to kick things off. And I might even ask you what reflections might have gone through your head during that moment of stillness. But I am James Beshara, the co-founder of Magic Mind, as well as a student and in the last few years, a teacher of the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta, which it's been since I was 26. I was just telling a friend before we got started that our dad raised us, I'm the youngest of 5, and our father raised us essentially Buddhist Catholic. We grew up in a Catholic household with books on Buddhism all around the house. He taught us to meditate when when I was 8 years old and when we were quite young, and had a love and appreciation for philosophy, East and West, during my upbringing, the entirety of my upbringing. And at 26, going through a daily kick to the teeth in running one of my previous companies was so hard. I really needed a proper orientation with how things were, because my philosophy at the time was not working. It was making things worse and worse, and I didn't even realize that I had a philosophy. But my worldview of, if I just want it more, if I work harder and I just want it more than everyone else, then all of these things that I desire will be mine, and all these things that I desire will make me happy, which for those that don't know, academically, that's the romantic philosophy that makes its way into nearly every major mainstream movie, TV show, book, songs that we listen to on the Hot 100. And yet, as a philosophy, it has not been appreciated or revered as a philosophy for 150 years. It's largely been left behind as like, that probably isn't it. Wanting things even more, and these external things providing us eternal happiness. Living happily ever after. That's the phrase at the end of so many of the movies we grew up with. Turns out very few philosophers subscribe to that viewpoint any longer. And it was a very common one for about 150 years. But for the last 150, it has not been a heavily revered philosophy. And yet it is the culture I grew up with and subscribed to without even knowing it, that was my worldview. And every time I pushed the pedal forward, the car would just go in reverse. And through 6 years of building my last company and hitting a really, really deep breaking point, about 18 months of depression, I started to find a lot of solace and in a reorientation to the philosophy that is at the seat of nearly all Eastern philosophy, Buddhism included, which is at the base of, starts with the 4 textbooks, the Vedas, and then 1,000 years later, Hinduism gets built on it. Hinduism, as the adage goes, Buddhism is Hinduism made for export, as it leaves India and enters China. And as it enters China, then you have derivations of that leave China and enter Japan, like Zen. And you can trace it all back to these 4 textbooks, the oldest textbooks in the world, the Vedas, and the philosophy of these 4 textbooks, the crystallized philosophy with no religiosity to it. It's called Vedanta. And when I started to listen to these lectures by this guy, Alan Watts, which I'm seeing a handful of heads nod, I was like, holy shit. That makes so much more sense than my current worldview. So that was 13 years ago. And here we are today. And Geoff, I'll let you give a little background on yourself, but this philosophy is the basis of these two podcasts that I host and co-host that 50 people listen to. But the Magic Mind team months ago was like, you host these every month and they're growing and people seem to have a thirst for it. Why not do that? Do these at Neuhaus? And lo and behold, here we are with 100 RSVPs each time, which kind of blows our collective minds, especially my mind, because 1 in 10,000 find these things interesting. But for the 1 in 10,000 that do, it's hard to find anything that's more fascinating than these concepts, which we'll dive into in a sec. But Geoff, you want to give a little background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. Originally from Los Angeles, born and raised here, former football player. I used to play sports and I was really good at it. And that led me to breaking some records at Cal. Go Bears. I love my school. Got a few Cal Bears in the house right here. Shout out Jackson. But originally born and raised here. Went to Palisades High School, where I led the country in yards as a wide receiver. Ended up going to Berkeley, broke all the records there as a wide receiver. Turned down the NFL, which was probably one of the biggest, most monumental moments in my life, where I, born in South Central, it's kind of like the American dream for us to go out and use sports as a tool to earn an income. And at the height of my career, I walked away from it all. And it was just one of those moments where I kind of knew the writing was on the wall. I wouldn't be able to do that for much longer. And my family, on the other hand, they just were like, we need that money. You got to go get the money. So when I made that decision, and I'll circle back to that decision and what got me out of that trap that I was in. But I thought it was my idea or my goal to save the family. I thought it was my job to save my family. So anyway, but I'm...
No, long form. I love long form.
Okay,
You know that I love
okay.
long form answers. If there's any space for the long form, context building also maybe the deeper, just beneath anything that you've ever said before, deeper reasons behind anything, this is the place for it.
Okay, so I basically contracted myself to be unhappy for a long time after putting the pressure of saving the family on my back. And
What do you mean by contracted to be unhappy?
I made a decision. I made a choice. Nobody forced this idea on me other than myself. But I thought that the gift that I was given through athletics that God gave me through, my parents making me, I thought that my job and my duty was to use that to help others. I thought that was my job, was to get them out of their hell that they were in. And they did a good job at reiterating that with some of the things that they would say based on my abilities. So it was a difficult time to say no, to do something for myself when I had never been selfish. And so it was a really tough time for me. And I went on this chase to figure out how to do it. I wasn't going to do it in the NFL. That was obvious. I said no. So how was I going to save the family? And so I eventually started an all-boys private boarding school in Canada, which I owned and operated from 2012, 13 to about 2018. And that was it. That was going to be the thing that was going to save us. And that was going to be the breakthrough. And all of that led to me getting cancer and stressing and going crazy over trying to be the hero. And cancer was the only thing that got me out of this contract. It got me out of this trap that I was in. And it forced me to look at myself. It forced me to actually get to know myself a little better and stop trying to go after things that are outside of myself. So a lot of things, we pray for and you hope don't happen. And a lot of people would say, oh, poor you got cancer. But it wasn't that for me. Cancer was the best thing that happened to me. It allowed me to learn things about myself and things about the world that I live in. And so that's a little bit of my story.
We'll get into a little bit more. I think you touched on a really valuable concept of a contract of unhappiness. This comes from a phrase from one of my mentors. It's a brilliant thinker, Naval Ravikant, for any of the startup folks that know Naval. And he has this quote of, desire is a contract we make with ourselves to be unhappy until we get what we want. And it's so contrary to what we think of desire, because we think desire is our route to happiness. That is the romantic philosophy. Academically speaking, the romantic philosophy is you can move the world if you want it bad enough. You know, you hear sports stars, coaches say, if you want it bad enough. Well, if I want to dunk from the free throw line bad enough, is that the limiting factor? Is I just don't want it enough? Or is it maybe a glossed over, really nice articulation for an alignment of incredible natural skill and incredible determination? And that's how you dunk from the free throw line. It's not necessarily just wanting it bad enough. But that romantic philosophy that I said that a few minutes ago, that is no longer really revered philosophically, it still is so pervasive in our communities, in our culture, in our society. And a tenet of that is that desire is the route to happiness. And if you aren't happy, then you aren't desiring enough. The Buddha, 2,500 years ago, said something slightly different. Desire is the root of all suffering. The root of all suffering is this thing that 2,350 years later, European philosophers are scratching at the surface of. Maybe more desire is the route to happiness. Now, Romanticism had which is so hilarious, and there is some value in the romantic ideals that were a counterweight to the overly rational analytical ideals of the Enlightenment. So there was a correction, and it's just what humans do. We overcorrect and then overcorrect again and overcorrect again. But this idea of desire being the route to happiness, when the philosophies that are still studied and have been for thousands of years point to it as the root of all suffering, at least in the East, is a fascinating contrast. And I think it's encapsulated so beautifully in this phrase of desire is a contract we make with ourselves to be unhappy until we get what we want. We say, all right, I want to be partner at that law firm. It might be 9 years, 10 years away, but I want to be partner at that law firm. That thought flow becomes a desire. That desire becomes a contract. Before you know it, 8 years and 364 days until that milestone, 9 years down the road, unhappy until we get what we want. And you get that, and you sign up for 3 more desires, 3 more contracts. So in that phrase, do you mind building out a little, unless there are other thoughts that just got sparked? I would love to know what goes through your mind when you say being unhappy with this contract that you had signed. What was Geoff like breaking these records, getting these accomplishments, All-American, getting kind of these incredible pats on the back? What was the inner state of you during all of that?
Yeah, so because of the desires, I never appreciated what was happening in the present. So it was like, no matter how many catches I had, no matter how many touchdowns I scored, no matter how many times they showed me on ESPN, it wasn't good enough because I was so attached to the outcome, the cookie at the end, the goal at the end. So the desires led to that mental agitation of not having. It led me to always be reminded that I didn't have what I wanted. And so instead of appreciating the great things that were happening, I was robbed of it by feasting on my future.
Well, now let's jump into the philosophy, if you'd like. What was, and during this transition from feasting on your future to a cancer diagnosis, I believe it was stage 4, which we chatted about a bit last conversation. How did that shift you from feasting on the future when your future was anything but certain?
It was an immediate. Actually, it wasn't immediate. It was progressive. The change of my brain and how it worked. I mean, initially when I got diagnosed, stage 4, I didn't know what stages meant. It didn't mean anything to me at that moment. I knew that I was Geoff McArthur, and anything that I ever wanted to accomplish, I had accomplished. So naturally, I was a little bit cocky and arrogant going into it because I felt like I could beat anything. And that wasn't the case at all. I beat it the first time through chemo, but in less than a year, the cancer metastasized. It started going towards different organs, and it was trying to kill me. So at that moment, I And I always tell this story about originally fighting cancer. I fought it in a way that I was very protective of my energy and protective of the people around me, protective of the things that I listened to, protective of the things that I ate. So
before or during the fight?
During. So during the first battle
and
with
beforehand,
cancer.
you weren't protective?
No.
I've never heard you talk about that a little bit. Do you mind building that out a little more?
As far as the prior cancer, like how
prior
I lived?
Cancer, anything, everything, just not protecting what you let into your life, your body, your mind, and a massive shift.
That's interesting. We've never talked about that. And prior to being diagnosed with cancer, I was a very gifted athlete, and sometimes your gift can become your curse. I thought I was invincible. I literally thought I was invincible. And I was one of those athletes that I could do a couple of push-ups and the results would come. I know you guys all hate me. I'm sorry. I didn't do it. My mom and dad got together. They produced this. I didn't do it, but I benefited from that. But also I didn't benefit from it because when it came time to actually go through real processes, I skipped levels a lot. And we know about that. We know how bad it can be to skip levels and jump levels. There's always the redirect and the correction. So cancer was the redirect, and it was the redirect that allowed me to have to actually face things in its entirety. I couldn't skip any levels with that. I had to face it a little differently. So, beforehand, being very gifted, I was a little bit arrogant, and I had to learn how to actually respect myself and do things the right way. I had to hydrate. I had to take my vitamins, and I had to do it the right way. So that's a gift, being able to have that experience and come out on the other end. Very grateful for what I've been through and what I've learned.
Dude, I make all of my mistakes when I'm riding high, when I feel great. And I've got a friend, a comedian friend, that he was saying that he when he feels low, he's like, F it. I'm just going to sabotage the rest of these scraps. I'm feeling low. And he's been in and out of sobriety for many years. And I was like, that's so interesting. I make all of my mistakes when I feel invincible. I feel like, all right, I've got this cushion. Come on in. I feel like I can now get a little bit wheels off, a little loose. And then there's a deconstruction, a loop, a downward spiral. And I'm like, everything was going so well. Why did I do that? And I think a big part of it is, and philosophically, so this philosophy that we both study each morning, you can tap into the lectures from the ashram in India that I study with, that everybody in the Venice Vedanta club that's here studies with. My wife and I do it daily. It is it's such a 2025 modern technological innovation, tapping into a tiny little ashram in India each morning for these lectures. There's a 3-year course you can go through. I've done it. I'm on the 4th time of doing it. So you can just do it over and over again. And one of the things that the founder of the ashram, who's 97 now, says all the time is, all it takes is one decision and you can destroy your world. And the idea that I had was like, no, it's a couple decisions. I'm making mainly good decisions. And then I see this pattern of like, everything's going so well. Why did I push myself? Right? I have this amazing rhythm in my day. And then I went out really late, had a few too many drinks, destroyed my sleep. And now I'm back to square one. It's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get back into that great rhythm. And the example that he talks about is in Shakespearean tragedies. And this is such a beautiful example. In Shakespearean tragedies, it's one decision, one focal point within the entirety of the plot, one decision, and everybody's dead at the end. And it's so beautiful, so illustrative of life. And it's not like, oh, you're a good person, so you'll stay out of the demise of your own decisions, because 70% of your decisions are good. But you think that that's okay, and a plank feels like solid ground for a little while. You're making kind of 30%, 20% bad decisions, and then you end up with the wrong person. Maybe you have a few children. There's divorce. And now those children you've walked on what you felt like was solid ground for a little while. 15% of the decisions were not the right decisions. And now you have children that may have post-traumatic growth or may deal with the repercussions of 15% being off, or maybe one very wrong decision that leads to a separation and leads to a transformation for those children for the next 8 decades of their lives. And this is not new. This is not novel. Like I said, every Shakespearean tragedy has this one point where one of the main characters, Macbeth is the one that always comes to mind, where Lady Macbeth is like, hey, Macbeth, you should be king. They're living large. Everything's great. Like couldn't be going better. And yet that decision of like, hey, I should be queen and you should be king. And then his decision of, yeah, I'm so close. And if Duncan died, then I'd be king and I could rule this place. Fast forward 45 minutes and everybody's dead at the end. And I've been thinking about this the last few days. What's so interesting in Macbeth, in the dialogue is when he kills the king, he says, I've murdered sleep, which is a beautiful articulation of when we do what we shouldn't do, when we do what we know we ought not to, what it destroys within us, our inner peace. And this philosophy says what we are all seeking is what every one of us is seeking, and our myriad of different symbolic ways in which we're pursuing it. What we're really seeking behind the symbol of the symbol of the symbol of behind partner, behind $10 million in the bank account, behind spouse, what we're really seeking is peace and prosperity within ourselves. Peace and prosperity. And I'd never heard that simplification. I'd never heard that articulation in my life before this philosophy. What we're really seeking, take it or leave it, what this philosophy says, each one of us is actually seeking deep down is peace and prosperity, and not one or the other, but both. Not peace, but no prosperity, that you have peace, but you're worried about paying rent. And not prosperity, you're a billionaire and you're in jail. You're a king, but you can't sleep. We want both. And it's so interesting that this life event kind of made you shift to where I made you what sounds like rock bottom, in which we've chatted about before, made you start to think of, I need to do everything right. And when you're riding high, it's like, I can do anything I want. But it's an interesting pattern that I noticed in my life, where it's like when things are going well, it's when I make all of the mistakes. And unless I'm really, really aware of, hold on, this is when you get really loose with it.
Yeah, I was snowboarding a couple of weeks ago, and I started getting really good, and I was like starting to get a lot of confidence, and it led to a nasty wipeout. So yeah, definitely can relate. I wanted to talk about this concept of moreness and desires, and I was listening to you speak about Genesis and how you briefly just talked about one bad decision, everybody dies. So in Genesis, can you touch on what happened in the beginning with Adam and Eve, one of your, I guess, like now that you've been studying this philosophy, and how you take that now?
Yes, definitely. So I think this it was a recent episode on Daily Vedantic. So on Yoga for Your Intellect, which is a podcast it's a conversational podcast between me and the teacher that introduced me to the ashram that we study with each morning. And Joseph, who's I'm from Texas. He's a fellow Texan. So it's a banter. The other day I was like, we're like the sports radio of philosophy, because it's really just friendly banter around these philosophical concepts. And that's YFY, Yoga for Your Intellect. And that's maybe every 2 weeks. He's in India and teaches over there half the year. So it's when we can schedule those episodes, about every 2 weeks. And then the Daily Vedantic, taken from a page from the Daily Stoic. I was like, there should be 5-10 minute episodes each day on this philosophy for more bite-sized, snackable concepts. And another word for this philosophy is Sanatana Dharma, which another phrase for it, which is Sanskrit for eternal principles. So this whole philosophy is just eternal principles, about 25, 26 different principles that you can apply in your life. And it's so practical, so different than most of what we think of in the West of philosophy being kind of academic, esoteric, abstract. This philosophy is so friggin' practical. There's probably 3, 4, 5 different knowledge bombs that is what I call them, these principles that we might touch on from this conversation today that you can apply 30 minutes from now, an hour from now in a meeting, 2 hours from now in a hard conversation you got to have with a coworker that maybe you weren't going to have before coming to something like this. But yes, this reinterpretation, or what I feel like is a fuller interpretation of the fall of Genesis, of this symbolic story that is so profound, has so many layers, any idea that has lasted within human consciousness longer than any structure, empire, any other ideas that humans have come up with, probably has a whole lot of truth within it. And the fall from paradise, the fall of humanity, separation from God, Genesis 1, all of the ways that we refer to it, it's been around a long time. So it probably has some truth to it, some value. And this, growing up, I only had, as a Catholic, only had this. Certainly wasn't a literalist. The Bible being taken literally it's a recent phenomenon. It's only been in the last 130, 150 years. So it's primarily, and Christ taught in parables. So it's primarily been metaphorical and symbolic. And the symbolism is still, even within growing up in a Catholic household, is still pretty pixel thin. It was not deep symbolism within it. But within Vedanta, where you have these principles within something like the Bhagavad Gita, which is almost like the Bible for Vedantins in many ways. And then 1,000 years after the Vedas, like I said, you have Hinduism. It's almost like a culturalization, ritualization built around these principles. And every few hundred years, someone comes along and gets us back to just the philosophy without getting too distracted by the rituals, which have their time and place, can be beautiful. But they're meant to preserve the philosophy. They're not meant to replace the philosophy. And humans just kind of forget the philosophy and just go through the motions of the rituals so often. Growing up Catholic, I know that well. And once I started to tap into the philosophy and the deeper meaning behind the texts within this philosophy, like the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, the world's most famous poem, can be read in 30 minutes and distilled into 2 primary points. It's so crazy that it can be distilled down into these 2 simple points, but they are: you are not the actor. So you are not who you think you are. You are not the actor that's doing this, and you're certainly not the actor that built that company, that made partner at that law firm, that can do 3 push-ups and get jacked. As Geoff already noted, as the parents, that was just genetics. We are not the actor that we think we are. We're just a continuation, a follow-through, an observer of what's happening through us. So you are not the actor. Even if you find yourself king or queen or victor on the battlefield, you are not the actor. It's the universe moving through you. And you are not who you think you are, the author of your story. There are many, countless authors that have given you those genetics or that circumstance. But the other main point, you're not the actor. The other main point is the fruits of your actions are not yours. The fruits of your actions are not yours. In the world's most famous poem, 2,500-year-old, 30-minute dialogue conversation between a warrior prince and his charioteer, these are the 2 main points. And I can mention both of these points to a Western audience. I know when I first heard them, I just right over my head, I was like, that sounds kind of interesting, but certainly not as profound as some of the other philosophical concepts I've come across. And yet the profundity of these concepts just get It gets deeper and deeper and deeper. 12 years in, deeper and deeper and deeper. These phrases that definitely there are some knowledge bombs, like wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. There's some knowledge bombs that hit me the second I hear it. I'm like, holy hell. I told my wife I was going to stop cussing. So I'm reworking new vernacular right now in real time. And we have 3 daughters, and now they're of the age where they can start to listen to these. So I'm like, all right, let me edit myself a bit. But these knowledge bombs that hit me in my stop me in my tracks, like wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. I'm like, whoa, I've never heard wisdom defined like that before. Or love is seeing no otherness, which we talk about quite a bit. I'm like, oh my God, I've never heard a definition of love like that, seeing no otherness. And then there are some that I'm like, these are the things that people have been saying for 2,500, 5,000 years for some of them. And they take time. They're like an aged wine where it's like, oh my God, that's so much deeper than the ones that stop me in my tracks. Like, the fruits of your actions are not yours. The fruit that a tree drops, the tree doesn't benefit from. The value of a tree to us, an apple tree, a cherry tree, an avocado tree, the value to us that the tree itself is producing has no value to the tree. And if it was any other way, then the fruit would not be ours. We would not be able to consume it. It'd be the tree just making it for itself. Isn't that fascinating? That the value of the apple tree in the apple orchard to us is the apples that it throws off. And yet, in nature, that tree does not benefit from those apples. It's its gift to all of us, selflessly. There is no vector in which it benefits from it. Maybe in some indirect way. You've got animals that come eat it, and they're part of the cycle. But it's kind of a stretch to come up with a way in which that apple tree is benefiting from those apples. This philosophy says the exact same thing, that you're a tree upon which many fruits will be born. But they're not yours. They're not for you. The knowledge that you tap into that produces the fruits of your labor, learning how to do something, when to do it, mastering a skill, becoming great at football, or great at teaching as an educator. The fruits of your labor are not for you. They're for your family, your community, your region, your state, your country, all humanity, all living beings. For the universe at large, they're not yours. And the fruit of the knowledge that you seek, when it is pursued for your own self-oriented benefit, I'm going to study, and I suffer from this greatly. I'm going to study this philosophy so I can learn how the world works to get the most out of it. It absolutely teaches you how the world works. This philosophy, you listen to a few episodes of Yoga for Your Intellect or the Daily Vedantic, or you read Vedanta Treatise, the seminal book that explains this whole philosophy beginning to end in really modern language from the founder of the ashram, or you could read the Gita itself. You could read the Vedas. When you pursue it to where it's like, I'm going to understand how it all works and pacify my mind because I need solace. I'm doing it wrong and I want to do it right. And I want to get more. I want to get that peace and prosperity. It can work to a great degree, not even a certain degree, a great degree in learning how to. Since studying this philosophy, I've started 3 companies and the last company before this philosophy burnt out, 6 years in, 18 months of depression, total failure, had very little to show for it at the end of 6 years. Started studying this philosophy, thankfully for all of those events. There was a complete deconstruction of like, I am not doing this right and I can't fool myself anymore. Started to tap into timeless wisdom, started to see how, wow, this really explains my experience. This really explains like how this works. Even human relationships. This is another knowledge bomb, is attach, you lose, detach, you gain. I was like, that is how human relationships work. when I'm too attached to someone. Everyone knows in the dating game, get too attached or someone's too attached to you. That very attachment is the reason that it doesn't work out. Detach, you gain. You get some elbow room from that other person. You kind of feel this self-sufficiency. You don't need it. And then you're like, wow, this is actually now really working. And nature abhors a vacuum. Pull away and it's like, oh, they're coming even strong. Wow, this maps to my experience. These knowledge bombs, they all map to our experiences. And you can use it for your own self-gain, self-orientation, selfish gain. But the fruit of a tree is not meant for the tree. And this really deep concept of especially the most fruitful tree there is, seeking knowledge. It's not for ourselves. Well, you have the story in Genesis. Adam and Eve in paradise, in total harmony with the entirety of being, of the universe. Their entire universe was not only in perfect harmony, they had no vulnerability. Not only was it harmony between them and this beautifully symbolic time and place, but they had no vulnerability. It wasn't until after the fall that they recognized they were naked, which symbolizes like, oh, we're vulnerable. It wasn't until after the fall that they had this adversarial relationship with their environment. Loss of harmony, being kicked out. That's being kicked out of that harmony with their environment. It was not a geographical place. It was a loss, separation from that harmony that they had before. And what caused it? The tree of knowledge and its fruit, which was there before they ate it. It was there throwing off knowledge. It was there for them to enjoy the shade. It was there symbolically in the garden as a very important part, the center of the garden, center of the harmony, as long as they didn't eat from the fruit. It was there as a part of paradise. They were a part of paradise. It was part of harmony as long as they didn't take the fruit and use it for themselves. That symbolic depth, whether it is the fruit of hitting a financial milestone, the fruit of getting that house you've always dreamed about, the fruit of knowledge, at its deepest sense, the fruit of knowledge. Seek a bit of wisdom. You have this clarity and now you're using it for your selfish gain. That is the quickest way to get kicked out of your community. And loss, separation from that harmony, that clarity, that wisdom, that ability to see the end in the beginning was supposed to be for the fruit of the entirety of the paradise that you could be in. But you use it for yourself and you find yourself outside of it. So that's the added depth that this philosophy has given to a story of, it wasn't disobeying so much as, hey, here's how it works. You eat from this tree, you think the fruit is yours instead of the garden's, and you'll find yourself outside of the garden. And it wasn't, this philosophy has no concept of some like outside cosmic scoreboard or judge that's deciding your fate. It's more of, here are the laws of nature, and break them. Jump off a 30-story building. There's the law of gravity. Whether you believe in it or not, here are the laws, take it or leave it, but you could use it to your advantage to know where to walk and where not to. You could use it to your community's advantage. But the more you understand it, and the more you understand the depth of the fruits of our actions are not ours, the more depth I discovered in one of the oldest stories in the West.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That was a really deep, detailed response to
long-winded as well. Yeah, apologies for the long-winded response.
And I just want to point out the way your brain works, to be able to compartmentalize everything and still stay on task is really it's something that I'm striving to try to mimic. I can't do it yet, but
as my wife will tell you, it's as much of a curse as it is blessing. Good thing I do it in a room alone with a microphone on a podcast to get it out of my system before I'm back in civilized society.
There you go. But yeah, to kind of go backwards to the first time I fought cancer, I was fighting. The second time, when I knew eventually that I would die, I surrendered. I surrendered to what life is, which is it's a blip of time that you get, and it's a stream of experiences that you get to have for an amount of time that you don't know. You don't know how long it's going to go for. So I started to get really good at being present. I started to live very intentionally. And I started to really understand, especially with this philosophy, that I was the person constructing my fortune and misfortune. I was the person responsible for my happiness, my sadness. I had the ability to control that with my inner peace and inner working. So it was again, that was probably when all the magic started to happen for me, is when I surrendered, not fought. So fighting cancer didn't allow me to get healed. Surrendering to what was and what really is allowed me to get to a place where I could be here and now, that's all we got.
What is something you believed? This is an interview question that I ask for Magic Mind and have for years, but I have a feeling the answer is going to have a lot more depth to it than a typical person that gets asked because of the cancer coming back and that surrender you just mentioned. What's something you believed? Usually the question is, what's something you believed 10 years ago that you no longer believe today? Because if people believe the exact same things that they believed 10 years ago as they believe today, that might be symbolic of something. That might be maybe they have it all figured out, or maybe their thinking is not evolving. What's something you believed fervently before cancer that you no longer believe today?
I believed that there was something outside of myself that was going to bring me peace. I believed that it was a big house and a big car. And, when you're miserable for a long time, you start to make up things that might not be true. And so for the longest time, I associated my own internal struggles and internal happiness with not having things on the outside world. And after my cancer diagnosis and after fighting it twice, I had a reality check that I brought a trophy to God in Santa Barbara, and I took this most inspirational trophy to God. And I just said, look, I don't know how much time we got left. I want you to use me to attract more people to you so that they can find the peace that I found.
What do you mean trophy?
I got an award when I was at Cal in 2003 for the most inspirational player on the football team. And there was some inspirational dudes on this team. You got Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers, right?
Aaron Rodgers, who was going to come to this today. Is he in here? He was literally going to come here today. You didn't know that. It was going to be a surprise. But yeah, so Aaron Rodgers, I won that award over Aaron Rodgers. I won that award over Marshawn Lynch. And these are really inspirational guys. I'm not bragging about myself, but I believe that if I had that ability, which was chosen by my teammates, not me, that if I had that ability then, I could still have that ability now to inspire others. So I wanted God to use me to inspire others to find themselves before they leave this place. And where was I going before that?
I was asking what's something you believed before that you no longer believed, and you had mentioned that you brought this trophy to God. What? And do you mind, just out of curiosity, what do you mean trophy to God? Where were you? What did the place look like?
Yeah, I created a wellness retreat for myself. I saw people doing it online, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a wellness retreat for myself. I drove up to Santa Barbara. I stayed in this cool hotel. I made an itinerary. Morning routine was going to be on tack. We were going to wake up, study, and reflect like we always do. Then I was going to jump in the ocean after I studied and reflect. And then I would walk around and act like a photographer. I would play around and act like I would tell people like, let me take that picture. I'm a photographer, please. Like I can help you. And it wasn't true, but I just, and then I went to the salt cave.
I'm pretty sure if you hit click on a camera, you're a photographer. Touché. So we all are.
Touche. But yeah, so I created all this event to go up there and just to like really tap into myself and nature and reconnect and all these things. So I took this trophy up there with me in particular, and I wanted to do a sunrise meditation where I kind of submitted to God in my own special way. I didn't grow up religious, but I definitely have always had a spiritual connection with God. So I wanted to be utilized, and it was kind of one of those moments where I really leaned into not living for myself anymore. It was a big deal to live for other people. And I also connected with the fact that most of my greatest achievements they'd always come through the desire to do for others. A short story on that. We were playing Stanford in 2004, and I had the biggest big game of all big games. I had the historical day, a lot of catches for a lot of yards, and I wouldn't have had that had it not been for a teammate who came up to me at halftime. At halftime, I had already had a career day, and we were winning. Or actually, we were losing, but I was injured, and I could have just said, you know what, I've contributed to the team. I'm going to walk out. You guys got it from here. And this guy came up to me, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and I wasn't a big fan of this guy. And when he put his hand on my shoulder, I moved and was like, don't touch me. I don't like you. And he knew that. And he didn't like me either. But the fact that he was reaching out to touch me at a moment where, and he says, Geoff, are you coming back in the second half? We can't win this game without you. And I looked at him and I was like, maybe, But at that moment, a decision was made that they needed me and I had to go out there and perform. And so over time, keeping others in mind have always given me strength that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own. So in Santa Barbara, I took that trophy to God and I said, let's do this again. I did it in 2004. Let's do it again in 2024 or 2023. And literally, I work with kids. So it was fun to give them an example of what it might look like to be dealing with a life-threatening disease, but then still carry yourself like a champion. I thought that was like a great opportunity.
The idea of and I think my microphone might be going in and out. Lucas, is it going in and out? The idea of what we really seek, what completes us, fulfills us, being outside of ourselves, that is the message that we are told. There's a great line from Ramana Maharshi, this great sage from India, said, and Vedantin, that said, you're born in the shade. Why do you keep going out and getting burned? That's Genesis. You got it all. And yet, you take the fruit and you're like, I could have this too. I wonder what this will provide me. And it's a fascinating chorus that we get from society and culture at large, that fulfillment is outside of us. It's so prevalent that it's just taken for granted. Like, that is obviously true. What we need is outside of ourselves. And we even reinterpret, misinterpret, abuse, mistranslate words of the sages and saints to fit that bill. Kingdom of heaven is within you. About 150 years ago, it got changed to kingdom of heaven is among you. Christ's words got changed from kingdom of heaven is within you. And then you ask ChatGPT or you look up the original Greek and you're like, oh my God, no, it's undeniably kingdom of heaven is within you. And talk about a radical revelation that the Pharisees, the Hebrew tribes at the time, the Roman polytheistic culture at large, the Roman Empire, that was so radically counter to everything that their culture said. There's no kingdom of heaven is not within you. It's anywhere but within you. That's impossible. And it's one of the proclamations that led to excruciating death penalty for the guy who was saying it. But this, even if it comes up in our major traditions, even if we are told by these titans of thought that the kingdom of heaven is within you, or you're born in the shade. Why do you keep going out and getting burned? You hear that, we might even nod, and then we're like, can't wait for that shirt to get delivered on Amazon. Can't wait for the mortgage to get closed for this house that we're going to get. Can't wait to find that other person that's going to actually complete me, because of all of the movies that just wildly end with happily ever after. And we buy into these stories. And it's like the donkey and the carrot that's 3 feet beyond its nose. That the carrot is 3 feet away. And the donkey will walk 10,000 miles. We all will walk 10,000 miles, not getting any closer, but still thinking on the 10,000th mile, and it's right there. It's almost there. It's almost there. And yet we have 10,000 miles. Each one of us might have decades of examples, decades and 10,000 miles of like, no, I never got any closer. I heard this guy on YouTube maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago say, all of those things that you swore, all of those things and achievements that you swore would make you happy, wherever you're sitting today, you got them and they didn't. Everyone in this room, especially in a place like Venice, highly competent people, 1,000 different things that we got. A week before, the night before. If that happens, I'm going to be happy. And we got them. And it didn't. And this philosophy just says it is within you. And yet it's so damn tempting to be like, no, I kind of thought that for a little bit, but it's right outside the shade. And we leave the garden, leave harmony. We can open it to conversations here or questions in a second, but is there anything that you wanted to add on that before we open it up for a Q&A?
Yeah, just again, kind of reiterating about searching outside. I know you've had people come to you as a founder and a venture capitalist. People come to you and they ask you advice about business, and they say, if I do option A, how do I make this decision? I want this. If I do option A, I get this. If I do option B, I get that. But you touch on that it's not important about what you get, it's who you become on that path.
Yeah, the question, and this is a great philosopher, a 20th century philosopher and social psychologist, Eric Fromm, said this, he wrote this amazing book, and in it he talks about how he's written many books, but his most famous lectures and perhaps book is all about a reorientation that we think the question is, what do I get? Option A, option B, this person, that person, these friends, those friends, this job, that job, this neighborhood, that neighborhood. What do I get? And the real question is, what do I become? The real question that we're really seeking is, and what we're seeking within ourselves is the person that we want to become, not the person that has these things, but the person we want to become. And it's often misguided and probably leads you down. I know that you could answer the question, what do I get? And it's like, well, this job pays more. And there's a huge, by the way, the summary of this philosophy, if you go to the Daily Vedantic, episode 1, 15-minute summary of the whole philosophy. So it's kind of the backstory of this philosophy that we're talking about. But and a handful of these knowledge bombs. But one of the knowledge bombs that is relevant here is that it's ultimately the most important work that we do for others. The most important work that we do for others, ultimately in these decisions of A versus B. The most important work we do for others is the work we do on ourselves. It's not handing out $100 to someone down and out. That can be helpful. It's not sitting with a friend physically, getting coffee with them when they're going through a really tough time. That can be helpful, but it's not the highest form. It's not emotionally sitting with them. That would be even higher. It goes this. The Gita ranks it in these 5 ways. The least helpful is financial. Second least helpful, still helpful, but these are least helpful, is giving your presence. Third helpful, least helpful. Third least helpful would be giving your emotional presence, identifying like, it must be really tough to go through this. Even more helpful would be to offer wisdom, a reorientation, the capacity to see the end in the beginning if you can see it, and they can't. Maybe you can provide that perspective. But the fifth, the highest, the most helpful thing that we can do, the most important work we do for others is the work we do on ourselves. That's what allows us to even tap into the wisdom, know how to mention it, when to mention it, how to say it in the right way. It allows us to emotionally recognize, okay, now is a moment where I can emotionally empathize with them. It gives you the wisdom to know this is a moment when I need to go be with them physically. And then it gives you the knowledge of like, I don't think giving this person money is going to be that helpful, but maybe that's what they need right now, Tuesday at 4 p.m. And that's what I'm going to do. But man, I got to do a lot of work on myself to provide them real help. And in that cascade, choosing between A and B, choosing who do we become, that's how we serve ourselves. That's how we serve our communities best, is continually choosing the option where it's like, that's a better version of myself. That's going to lead to a better version of myself, not, oh, that's what pays me more. That's what's going to make it easier. I mean, who goes to the gym and is like, how do I make this as easy as possible? Do a tour of the machines and then walk right out. Defeats the purpose. And yet that's what we do with our own cultivation of our character and development oftentimes. So let's open it up to the audience for Q&A of any questions that folks have. And I'll repeat it because we're recording this for an online. Should we do a microphone? Yeah, Lucas, if you want to toss that over here. All right. Had our first hand up right here.
Thank you, James. And what prompted me to raise my hand in that moment is there's obviously something implanted in our psyche as humans that drives us to do things, to create things, to provide both for ourselves and for our communities. And so this concept of the happiness is driven from within. It strikes me that if misinterpreted, that can lead to a lot of complacency and a lack of contributions into the growth of society generally. And what I found is that the pursuit of your passions often push you and drive you into situations that become very challenging, perhaps beyond what you thought you were getting into when you move into those spaces. And you guys talked a bit about desire. And I think, Geoff, you said it wasn't about expectation. It was about detachment from outcome. I think, and this is where I've, as James, you know, a little bit, I've currently kind of found myself being very attached to the outcome of the passion and desire and path and sort of set out on, and was hoping you might wax poetically about that dilemma, especially that of the entrepreneur who really is in pursuit of peace and prosperity, both for oneself, but also to benefit one's community, but are maybe struggling with maintaining that inner peace because you're being pushed and challenged and feeling also somewhat relegated to outside forces that sometimes help and sometimes serve as roadblocks, and philosophically how to kind of maintain the right mentality when going through this process.
Is a great question and great clarifying opportunity for it. We're born in the shade and yet we keep leaving to go get burned. The mistake can be that we're born to sit in the shade. And if I were to build on this concept is not to sit in the shade. There's plenty of work to be done in the shade. There was work in the garden before the fall. To just reiterate, there was work in the garden, in paradise, in this mythological concept of harmony. There was work. Adam and Eve were working the land. There is, if this philosophy, if you could break it down into 97% of it is the practical philosophy, meaning it's just so helpful in the day-to-day of our lives. 97% of the philosophy is practical. Like I said, an hour from now, a meeting, a internal dialogue around an entrepreneurial pursuit. And that 97% of the practical philosophy of Vedanta, by the way, you're going to hear the Google trend on Vedanta is like a straight vertical line. So you're going to hear about this philosophy a lot in the coming decades. I'm convinced that, it's, as I noted, it's the philosophy of the past. I think it's going to be the philosophy of the future. Within Daily Vedantic or YFY, I talk about how Alan Watts, Carl Jung, Aldous Huxley, Emerson, Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, she's the grandmother of the feminist movement here in the U.S. You have these Joseph Campbell, like these titans, my favorite authors, thinkers. They all study this philosophy daily, and yet you just don't come across it in our modern culture that often. But that's starting to change. The practical side of this philosophy, which is why it's becoming so popular, because it's so helpful in reorienting our thinking in our day-to-day lives. 97% of it, practical, can be summed up in 3 words: action, action, action. It is not a philosophy of sitting in a chair quietly in the woods, philosophizing, an isolated, solitary pursuit that we think of when I think of philosophy. It's action, action, action. The reason is because karma is the Sanskrit word for action. Karma yoga is seen as it's the pursuit of action, service to the community, because it heats us up to show us where our work lies. It's through our actions, through pursuit of a entrepreneurial endeavor, that we see, holy hell, I have a whole lot of desire, a whole lot of inner turmoil that I need to work through. It's through that action that we go from sitting lotus posture quietly in the morning thinking we got it all figured out to, 3 little kids crying at the grocery store, and you're like, oh my God, I have so much to work on. That action shows us where our work still lies. And it also, it allows us, it's like golf clubs on a golf course. It allows you to try out these principles to see, wow, that attachment you lose, attach you lose, detach you gain. When I detach from the results, things just start to work themselves out. They start to go much more swimmingly. For entrepreneurs and creators, I see this quite often, where the attachment, oftentimes it is for the results. I want a financial outcome. I want to live more comfortably. It is tied to these desires that we have. Peace and prosperity, that is an inner game. We think of peace and prosperity, world peace or prosperity, big house, pay off the mortgage, you have these worldly financial obligations. We think of peace and prosperity as an external game. It's not. Peace is a function of, does your understanding supersede your conflict? Conflict on one level is harmony on another level. If your white blood cells didn't attack the pathogens that it is probably attacking right now, you'd get really sick. Conflict on one level is harmony on another level. Oh, you all right? All right. Conflict on one level is harmony on another. We're all taking in this art with a new appreciation that we didn't have before, with even perhaps more attention, waking us up from any mid-morning slumber that we might have been because of this conflict. And what needs to supersede the conflict for us to have peace is not an absence of conflict. That would be the absence of your white blood cells fighting the pathogen, which would not end well for us. You need that conflict, but what supersedes it is understanding. You go to the gym and you don't destroy the muscles, you don't break them down, they don't grow stronger. So it's not an absence of conflict that we're seeking. Peace is actually a function of, does your understanding, inner understanding, does it supersede your conflict? Prosperity, we think even more so as an external pursuit. It's an inner game as well. Does your prosperity, it's simple of, do your means supersede your desires? If any of us feels like we're not prosperous enough, we need more prosperity, and we think it's out there, that is a lie. That is a modern myth of the highest order, that it's out there. We are in the shade, and we go out and get burned when we're like, nope, contract, to be unhappy until I get what I want, and it's got to be this house in this neighborhood with this amount of space, need it for all of my stuff. Or you can say, you know what? I can actually get by with quite a lot less. It's an inner reorientation of, man, if I just desire less, my means, any of the means of people sitting here today or listening to this with whatever device you have, if you're tapping into this type of philosophical content and these kinds of conversations, that you probably have a really good head on your shoulders, probably quite competent in the life that you lead. And you can reorient to where your means supersede your desires much quicker than you think. What I see happen with entrepreneurs quite often is either they do have these desires that outstrip their means, and that's going to be a source of inner conflict and lack of inner peace forever, because as you get more means, if that pattern is just the neurological pathways, the patterns of thought flow that you already have, your desires will just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you'll always be behind the 8 ball. And it is just this pursuit of these external fruits. That will cause its own inner turmoil. But what I see just as often is you have creators that love creating. And it's not an external milestone or fruit that they're pursuing. They just want to make sure that they can keep creating. I think one of the most stressful things for a creator that loves creating, oftentimes it's like, man, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And if this business fails and that's taken from me, and I'm going to go get another job, well, then wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. I can tell you right now, that's not the case. People that love creating, that have a swadharma, that's a huge principle within this philosophy, is your nature. And this philosophy will say, the Gita says it quite loudly, it's better to die in your nature, what you're wired to do, than it is to live in a foreign nature. So not only is it better for you to go down with the ship creating what you are meant to create, what you're wired to create. It's not only better for your community, but I can tell you entrepreneurially, as someone that's been building companies for 17, 18 years, that's invested in 200 and something startups, advised hundreds of startups for the last few years, I can tell you that no one will take that from you. If you love creating, even if your business fails, you just got a PhD in business, especially in your first business. You just got a PhD, and anyone listening to this that is in the midst of the grips of what feels like this might fail and my love of creating might be taken from me, I'm here to tell you the world won't let that happen. Because if that's your nature, the world will ask it of you again and again and again on the second, third, fourth time. And know that the first entrepreneurial venture, the first pancake, is the messiest, will be the messiest. There's no other way around it. To get to the perfectly round pancake, you got to get it out of the way. And the world's going to want that perfectly round pancake, that second generation, that third generation of your entrepreneurial endeavor. If this first one doesn't work out, even more so, because now you're even more illuminated by your experience, that PhD in life, your career, PhD in business, PhD in what people really want. So it won't ever be taken from you. And if that's the real inner turmoil, it's like, God, I love this so much. I don't want it, like a musician, feeling like it might be taken from you. It won't be. You might have to reorient your means and desires, your understanding and your conflict. But that's within you, and that's possible. And if it is your nature, it will not be taken from you. It'll be asked of you again and again and again. Yes, right next to you.
This wasn't so much as a question, but just kind of a reiteration of something you mentioned earlier about kind of always being one decision away from kind of changing our life. And it's been a practice over the last month that has like really changed my life. And it's just kind of moving through the world and life like it's just one big, massive ceremony. And we get to choose how we move through that. And all that it requires of us is our presence, our intention, and our attention. And that in and of itself like changes the entire game of how we interact with our world, with others, ourself, in that entire just sense of, one decision away from everything. When we bring that level of presence, that actually incites that inner peace, that inner calm.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And ties to this previous topic where if we are in the grips of what feels like could be failure or something we love being taken away from us, really reflect on detach, you lose. Detach, you gain. Attach, you lose. There is an attachment either to that work that you don't want anyone to take away from you, or an attachment to like, I put so much money in this, it's got to work out. I put so much time, it's got to work out. Your attachment to that outcome will cause it to fail. The reason is because that attachment narrows our gaze. Instead of having the presence and awareness to look at it objectively. This is why we can offer our friends so much better advice than we can take ourselves, because we have built-in objectivity to their problems. With our problems, this is what happens psychologically, philosophically, is that we have a narrowing of our perception. We can't see things clearly because we're so attached to things going a certain way. And instead of seeing 7 options, we see 2. And instead of having presence, we come to a meeting with fear. Instead of pitching to an investor with, man, this is just feels so right, we pitch it with anxiousness, with this fear, a lack of trust that it's going to work out. And humans are so smart. People pick up on that. That presence is one of the first casualties of attachment. But yes, right behind you is, I'm going chronologically. Yep, right there. Daniel, yep, from the folks that raise their hands. Yeah, go ahead.
Me? All right, yeah. We're kind of like going on this thing of desire, and this is something that I've been thinking a lot about from more of a spiritual perspective, and I would love your reaction to this, I guess, separation of physical desires versus inner desires. Because I think, an example of like, deep down, we all desire peace and prosperity, but that's separate from the concept of like desiring something is inherently going to cause us like pain and chaos. But it's more, my sense is that if you desire something physical, as in I would love this job as a partner at a law firm, that is almost in many ways like a small desire, because it may or may not, like that particular physical outcome may lead you to be peace and prosperity or may not. And so it was more this reaction of like, how do you view this delineation of like, there are certain desires that I think are actually very productive to have and very healthy to have, and you should have a big desire for peace and prosperity and be able to share your gift with the world and have the strength to do that and the knowledge to do that and the wealth to be able to do that. And then separating that from tactical things, physical things where, whether I get that investor or not, both outcomes could be good, because maybe this investor says no and a new investor says yes, it's even better. And then I never met them. And had I said yes to the first one, I never have gotten to that outcome. And it's a bit of an unstructured question, but more of a reaction to this.
That's the story of our lives. Once you really start acting, living, you see, like, as Geoff said a month ago, that cancer diagnosis was the best thing that, if I'm quoting you correctly, best thing that ever happened to him. We end up seeing with that hindsight that what we really wanted isn't what we wanted, and what we didn't want was exactly what we wanted. In some weird way, I've dealt with death in a family at an early age, and same thing. Most beautiful thing I would have never designed. Most beautiful thing that I would have never designed. It's one of them, and might be the most valuable thing that I ever went through. Who wouldn't want to go through valuable things? And yet, it's almost morbid to think about it or talk about it that way. Certainly would be extremely morbid to say, I want someone to go through that. Luckily, we don't design our lives to that degree. We design our inner happiness, but we don't design the external events that happen to us in a direct sense. Life is the greatest teacher, so it's like, all right, life is just going to teach me. It's going to teach all of us. The many desires, the Buddhists call it the 10,000 desires. Yeah, we all have 10,000 desires. The philosophical path is to eliminate desires through clarity, through knowledge. And knowledge is like a fire. It's talked about like a fire that purifies and burns away, eliminates desires over time. But the desire that we're told to hold on to, the valuable big desire, is to know what we really want, peace and prosperity, to know that, all right, knowledge of how this all works, maybe that's a valuable way to get peace and prosperity. But ultimately, yeah, paradoxically, this philosophy says, like building a fire, this philosophy loves talking about fire. Like building a fire, you burn away all of the desires that you have. The career milestone, the admiration, name, fame, power, status. You burn those away through the pursuit of the higher, through the pursuit of the self. Even this is a misnomer. There's no, according to this philosophy, it's all within. So you burn away all of those 10,000 desires and you're left with one, the stick that is flaming the fire, that's fanning the fire, that is building the fire. And then that is the last stick that you throw in. The last log of the fire is the desire for peace and prosperity, because that is selfishness, hedonism, in its perhaps wisest but truest form. I want that peace and prosperity for myself. I want that fruit for myself. Put it in the fire. And as this philosophy says, you find yourself back in paradise. But that is the paradoxical way of dealing with the fires, or sorry, with desires. Right here and then up there next. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you so much, Geoff and James. That was this is all really moving stuff. I'm going to try to pack two questions into one for both of you. Geoff, that's really inspiring what you said about cancer. My family has early onset Alzheimer's all over the place, and I'm from Turkey. And my whole life I've spent on like achieve, so that before it hits me, I've caused an external result, so that I've mattered before I'm hit with the same destiny. And I realized that brought me to this thing that you talk about, invincibility, like untouchability, this awful fear of people and situations that I want to be untouchable so that I'm okay. So what I'm curious about is, when we get close to that feeling of invincibility, when we get the awards, when we get the recognition, it's not peace and prosperity. It's this kind of contentment that is boring. And when I'm in that state, I'm inches away from making that one mistake that changes everything. So how do you reconcile your gifts with humility, like snowboarding? And also, just one question about Magic Mind. You're in this industry where I've been interested in this since I was 24, so that was 4 years ago. There's temperature therapies, exercises, and fasting, and all of this stuff that's very widely accepted. And then there's supplementation, and then there's 17,000 different things, and twice as more influencers. And it's how did you end up creating something that gives you what your body needs, but more importantly, what your mind wants? You put Bacopa, Cognizin, and Lion's Mane into the formula, but then you start sending weekly emails motivating people as to how to get stuff done and how to live a better life. How did you pull yourself out of that part of the business and start something new when there's so much competition? Thank you.
Sure. Geoff, you want to go first?
Yeah, the one thing that came to mind, and thank you for sharing that too about your family, and I resonate deeply with that, so I appreciate you being vulnerable. One of the things that came to mind was that in the pursuit of these things, and you talked about like trying to do something before it's too late and all these things, is I've noticed that when I get what I want, or I get these things, these external things, it's not that I'm happy with what I get, it's I'm happy I'm no longer chasing them. So that boredom you touched on, that boredom is probably your nervous system being used to the chase. So I would meditate on that, and just to figure out, where that root of that chase is coming from. I hope that helps.
Yeah, there's a great question on, and I think to round out that abundance, when I feel this abundance is when I make mistakes. And to round out this topic, it's because I recognize this abundance. I'm like, oh, things are going well. Then I, go drink it with friends, ruin my amazing routines that my friends know that I really like to dial in my routines, wake up at 4:30, throw that off kilter for 2 weeks. And it's because I'm using the abundance for myself. So if anyone else in here has that same experience of like, man, when things are going well, why do I sabotage it with something? And it's because when things are going well, it's not for you. And when we use it for ourselves, that is seeing the fruit and being like, oh, this is mine. Instead of, oh, this is abundance, let me keep investing it in my community, investing it in my career, my pursuits for others. It's like, oh, this feels so good, I can take it for myself. The comment on Alzheimer's is interesting because in the Gita it describes the enlightened one as having no memory. So perhaps a new orientation on, is memory a great thing? Memory is, in many ways, memory is it's a selection, it's opinion. It's choosing the things that we want. We certainly don't remember everything. Do you remember what you ate for lunch 10 years ago? We're choosing what we want to remember, and it's 0.00001% of our past. But we're choosing those things. It's as much of an opinion as any type of storytelling. So and we are bumping up on time if folks need to go, but we're here till Jeff and I can stay until 10:30. But so it's interesting that the sage is described as memoryless, not tied to the past. So maybe that's perhaps some a reorientation around the state of Alzheimer's that any of us might find ourselves in, to where maybe it's not all bad. I don't mean that tongue in cheek either. I mean that of like, who says memory is a great thing? This philosophy certainly doesn't. And memory is not a list of facts. The starting Magic Mind, super simple. I didn't want to do it, and then my community was just like, this Google Doc of 12 ingredients, 12 different things to take each morning, got shared at 20, 30, 50, and 200 people on a Google Doc at Airbnb, my friends and founders through Y Combinator, my previous company, friends in Silicon Valley. So I saw that and I was like, my antenna is going off that I probably should start something here. It'll be small, a little Shopify project. Take what was called in the Google Doc, James's Magic Potion, give it a real name, and it becoming Magic Mind. And every day it's just kind of like, where do people want us to take this? Just a grand experiment. Certainly different than how I started things before, where it was like, this is a big idea and I'm going to go imprint it on the world. This was like, I don't even really want to do this, but it's being called of me, and I've been pushing it off, saying no to it over and over again. I probably should see if there's something here. We had a question right back there. Nope, right there with you, Chris. Yeah. Hey.
I always love coming to these, and you briefly touched upon my question, but I want to kind of make it more succinct. In terms of the desire of, making sure your means don't supersede your desires, but also the desire of who you're becoming, and then being non-attached to that and being able to turn desire into aspiration. Like, what is that line and balance of? Great question.
And this ties back to desire and the paradoxical nature. It's paradoxical in the side of, well, to desire peace and prosperity, to desire to serve your community. These are still desires. So it is the last log that you throw in the fire. But the other area code in which you're touching on that is so valuable, and this philosophy is so amazing, and how it just has I mentioned this before in VBC, that it's like 26 golf clubs, and you can find yourself in any situation on the golf course of life, and you're like, oh, here's the club for that. The principle for this is, it's not what you do, it's what you do it for. So are you seeking peace and prosperity for yourself? Are you seeking it because it happens to be the optimal way to approach your day-to-day work for your community? Like, if you're not peaceful and you feel like, there's all these obligations, life obligations, financial obligations I can't meet, and it's destroying your presence, your awareness, your peace of mind, then you're not going to be that useful to your community. But if you pursue it so that you can be more useful to your community, it's a complete reorientation. And it's not what you do, it's what you do it for. There's a massive massive misconception within our society that it's all about what you do. That's because the predominant traditions of the last 2,000 years are based on doing things to show that you belong, saying things in the right order, or else you'd be burned at the stake. You know, the guy that translated the Latin Vulgate, the official Latin version of the Bible, into English, he's a Cambridge scholar. He was burned at the stake. He was burned alive. Our culture, it's not just like 2025 telling us what generations after generations have been told you'll be burned at the stake if you don't do the right things in the right way. If you don't say the right things in the right order, you go outside of it, and the people that love you will tell you, don't go outside the pale. Because of stories like that. I mean, that's so wild. If that's not a surefire sign of a brilliant philosophy and tradition being turned into a cult, I don't know what is. Translating it to another language and will burn you alive. So this predominant psychology of you must do the right things, it's all about what you do, what you don't do. God above watching us, judging us, eternal damnation in a lake of fire, or eternal bliss in the heavens based on what you do. This concept is so foreign to all of us that it's not what you do, it's what you do it for that matters. And it's worth writing down. And I say this every meeting, that reflection is 100,000 times more powerful than listening. This philosophy not only highlights the optimal ways to reflect in conversation and discussion, but also it is said that reflection is 100,000 times more powerful than listening. Any of us could hear something once and it's like, whoa, that really blew me away. 2 days later, it's like it never happened. In one ear, out the other. Reflection, repetition, seeing it from 360 degrees, trying to re-articulate it to friends. It's 100,000 times more powerful than listening, because what I just said is so powerful. And yet, how many times have we had to say it before in the last 2.5 years? It's still so common for all of us, myself included, to think, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing to do? What if someone does that? What if someone does this? And it's a reorientation of it's not what you do. It's what you do it for that matters. So in the topic of desire, am I desiring this for myself? These aspirations, these ambitions, reaching my capacity, are you doing it for you? Or reaching your capacity, are you doing it for your community? And it's a universe of difference. Yes, Kenan. And is it Kanan, right? Or Kenan?
Kenan.
Kenan.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, guys. I think a topic that came up a lot was, decisions and choice, right? And I think in this context, a lot of the focus was on choices within our locus of control. What can I do that's in my control? And I wanted to hear your guys' view also from the Vedantic perspective of decisions that others can make that actually impact us adversely. Example, someone makes a decision to drink and drive, and you're just driving on the highway and you get impacted by that. That wasn't your decision, right? Or even more external, an earthquake happens, this roof collapses, and God forbid, we all, perish. So kind of looking at those two perspectives, there are decisions that we have control over, and then there are decisions that others may have, or nature, the universal forces. Just curious to understand how do you both reconcile that, and also from the Vedantic perspective, how does one reconcile that?
And we'll make this the last question, and you can come up and mingle. Come say hey afterwards as well.
Can you ask that again?
Yeah, so it was just more about there are decisions we can make, right? And a lot of it's about what can we do in our lives to
No
become
one
better.
controls your inner state.
Yes.
But you. No one. So to reconcile it is chopping off the 50% of what we think controls us, it's not reconciling the two, it's chopping it off, separating it, recognizing that's an illusion. You can't reconcile the illusion in reality. It's just a recognition of that's an illusion. That isn't reality. No one can change our inner state. Drunk driver, a boss, cannot change our inner state. It's us that allows them, that gives them that authority to author this story inside of us. But when we're choosing the authors, it's really us that's choosing the story. I mean, you could give as good of a perspective as anyone of external circumstances, and did that change your inner state for the negative or the positive?
Yeah, definitely. I would also say to reorient. Every day I reorient myself with what is and what reality is. And again, I'm the first to tell you that we have no idea when that car crash is coming. We don't know what's going to happen. And so just maintaining a reality of just that you don't have control over any of that stuff. And that's perfectly okay, because the gift of life, I mean, that trumps and supersedes any type of adversity you're going to face. Is that as long as there's still time on the clock, you can still play and have fun in this game.
And it's and what this philosophy says is you're only putting more time on the clock. We put the time on the clock as much time as we need. That it's not a philosophy of you had one shot, and then eternity depends on those 32 years and or those 17 months. You pass away as a 17-month-old, and eternity depends on what happened during those 19 years. I say that with a smile, not because I think it's elementary, but I think that is, even though that is our conventional view in the West, and we laugh at something like reincarnation, which the sophisticated version of reincarnation is not like baby, adolescent, old person, baby. It's at every moment, like a dream, is a projection that has creation, maintenance, destruction. And like a dream, we find ourselves in this room, and when we want to think about the past, we project out a past that goes back as far as we want to the beginning of our 4-year-old, 3-year-old memories. But what this philosophy says, the sophisticated version of reincarnation, is not that you go through this like baby, adolescent, adult. It's that every moment you're recreating. You're creating, maintaining it, and then there's the end of this moment into the next thing we go to. And what this philosophy says is that it'll continue until we all wake up. And it's we think that there was 38 years before, but just like the dream, you're like, I'm in this room and it makes sense because of these and the dream just started. That's what this philosophy says is happening. This is all an elevated version of the dream. It's quite trippy, but if you listen to episode 1 of the Daily Vedantic, it'll give you a little bit more color there. But it is pretty much what it says, that this is all an illusion, elevated version of a dream. And part of that illusion is that it is this external world apart from us that changes our inner state. An external environment that can give us cancer, and that's going to be a negative thing. And yet that comes to pass. And you're sitting in front of people a month ago saying it was the best thing that ever happened to you. That drunk driver might be the best thing that ever happened to you. And it is the illusion that these external events change our inner state. That is the illusion, is that our inner state comes from these external circumstances. And yet this philosophy says over and over again that we are the makers of our fortune and the makers of our misfortune. The one thing I'll add on this before closing it out is you get hit by a drunk driver and you're paralyzed from the neck down. That is admittedly, that's like NBA Finals level of perspective that it requires. NBA Finals, 10 seconds left, and you've got 2 free throws. It's the height of the height of the height of the craft of preparing for what this dynamic existence might throw at us. And this philosophy, and so it's not to negate how dynamic that moment might be for someone, but to think that you will never have these moments is a complete chosen blindness, voluntary blindness for what life is going to present all of us. It is going to give us Alzheimer's, It's going to give us cancer. It's going to give us a fire that rages and burns 10,000 homes. It's going to give us loss of jobs, loss of family members, loss of limbs. We are all headed to the NBA Finals. And 10 seconds left, and we got the ball, and we're shooting free throws. It makes sense for us to prepare, to work, to practice those free throws for decades before we find ourselves maybe in a hospital bed after a drunk driver hits our car and relegates us paralyzed. This philosophy, Swami will say quite often in his lectures that pessimism is to expect the worst. Philosophy is to prepare for the worst. So it's not to take anything away from the dynamics of what external and internal situations can provide and smack us in the face with. But the philosophical approach there is prepare for the worst. And then when it comes, swish, you've been preparing for 3 decades. All right, on that, feel free to come up and say hello. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to Merritt, Josh, and Maya for helping put this all together. And thank you all for coming.